Every day we hear about new cases of violence, and the statistics are simply shocking. Every 2 hours, somewhere in the world, a woman dies at the hands of a man. This problem affects each and every one of us, regardless of age, gender, or social status. The story we will discuss in this episode is a stark example of how the pursuit of quick money and ill-considered decisions can lead to fatal consequences. A young Italian woman found herself trapped after being tempted by easy cash. She had no idea that her life was about to be shattered and that she would become the victim of a horrific crime. Our story's heroine, Carol Maltesi, was born in 1995 to a mixed Italian-Dutch family. Her mother, Giuseppina, was from Italy, while her father, Fabio, was from the Netherlands. Unfortunately, when Carol was still very young, her parents decided to divorce. Fabio moved back to his native country, while Giuseppina stayed in Italy to raise her daughter alone. It was a difficult challenge for the woman, as she had to work a lot, often far from home, to provide for her family. But despite all the hardships, Carol did not hold a grudge against her mother, understanding that she was doing everything possible for her sake. Carol grew up in the small provincial town of Sesto Calenda. From an early age, she displayed traits such as determination, decisiveness, and cheerfulness. Carol was a very active child. She took dance classes, loved horseback riding, and dreamed of traveling. In addition, she had a knack for learning languages and knew several foreign ones at a young age. But the girl's greatest passion was books. She could spend hours immersed in the world of literature. Despite all her talents and hobbies, Carol sometimes suffered from excessive boastfulness. But thanks to her openness, sincerity, and optimism, she easily made friends and attracted the attention of those around her. In 2015, the young Italian woman entered a technical university. It was during this period that her life underwent dramatic changes. She fell in love and became pregnant by her boyfriend. Despite her young age of 20, Carol decided to have the child, even though the pregnancy was unplanned. She sincerely believed that she would be able to cope with her new role as a mother. However, reality turned out to be much more complicated than expected. After giving birth to her baby in 2016, the young mother faced numerous difficulties. The child's father was also not yet financially stable, but despite all the hardships, the young couple was determined to cope with the challenges of family life. In an attempt to improve their situation, Carol, her boyfriend, and their young son moved to Verona, a larger city where they managed to find work. During this period, Carol got a job as a sales consultant in a shoe store. It seemed that life was gradually improving, and the young family, although not without difficulties, was coping with all the troubles. But already in 2019, another twist occurred in Carol's fate. She unexpectedly fell in love with another man, and, for several months, led a double life until the truth was revealed. Her betrayed boyfriend, the father of her child, decided to end the relationship, and Carol herself, who had long dreamed of change, supported this decision. Carol sought to start a new life with her beloved, who was living with his parents at the time, so she decided to temporarily leave her son with his father to give herself time to adapt and find ways to ease their fate. In addition to her personal problems, during this period, Carol's mother was suffering from a neurodegenerative disease that was rapidly progressing. Carol tried to spend as much time with her as possible, but already in February 2020, the world was shaken by a pandemic that hit European countries particularly hard. Italians, including Carol, found themselves in a very difficult situation. The lockdown made it impossible to work, move freely, and live a normal life. Due to the forced isolation, Carol faced serious financial difficulties. She could not even send money for her son's upkeep. This situation pushed the young woman to search for new ways to earn money. At first, she tried to launch a YouTube channel where she would share her experience of surviving under severe restrictions. Carol hoped to make money from advertising, but she quickly realized that it was a long and unrewarding path that was unlikely to bring her significant funds. Then Carol turned her attention to the OnlyFans platform, which seemed much more promising. Under the pseudonym Charlotte Engel, she began experimenting with creating explicit photo and video content. The first attempts brought in decent money, so Carol continued this activity, gradually moving towards increasingly daring material. In fact, Carol enjoyed what she was doing on the OnlyFans platform. However, this industry also had a flip side. When the girl's entourage learned about her new activity, many friends decided to break off relations with her. Carol herself considered such behavior unfair and called it nothing but prejudice. She sincerely believed that the world of explicit content was a kind of art form, and that Italy was simply lagging behind other countries in terms of progressive thinking. For Carol, it was obvious that most people visit such sites and view photos and videos of a spicy nature anyway, so she saw nothing wrong with her job. Gradually, Carol gained considerable popularity on OnlyFans, and she began to be invited to shoot adult films. Carol agreed to such offers without any hesitation and even participated in relevant performances. In interviews, Carol explained that she did not plan to devote her entire life to this. She already had certain projects for the future, but for now she was enjoying what she was doing and saving money to make her dream come true. At the same time, Carol began to publish posts on social media filled with indignation. The judgmental attitude of others towards her new job forced her to talk about the psychological pressure and constant moral condemnation she faced because of her activity. Carol defended women's right to freely choose their field of employment. Despite understanding that her work was unconventional for most people, Carol felt that she was being undeservedly humiliated for her choice. But public condemnation was not the only problem the woman faced. Her new boyfriend, for whom she had divorced her child's father, also had a negative attitude towards her passion. The situation escalated, and eventually the couple decided to part ways. At the age of 25, Carol found herself at a crossroads again and moved to the small town of Riscaldino, a suburb of Milan with a population of about 15,000 inhabitants. Here she tried to break with her dubious activity and got a job in a perfume store. But soon Carol returned to filming and quit her new job. It was in Riscaldino that fate brought Carol together with 42-year-old Davide Fontana, a banker and a rather well-known personality. The man actively ran his own culinary pages on social media, where he shared his knowledge about the history of haute cuisine and demonstrated his own achievements in this field. In addition, David was passionate about high-tech and photography, not traditional photography, but explicit photo shoots. As it turned out, Fontana had been married for many years and had a stable, loving relationship with his wife. But with the help of the internet, he realized another passion. He was looking for attractive girls who were willing to participate in spicy photo shoots. That's how he met Carol in November 2020. The man was enchanted by this girl, and soon a relationship developed between them. Despite the fact that Davide was married, he offered Carol sex for money, and she agreed. After some time in such a relationship, the banker realized that he had developed real feelings for his mistress. In March 2021, he confessed his infidelity to his wife and insisted on a divorce, exchanging a stable relationship for a fleeting affair with a young girl. At the same time, David deceived his wife by telling her that his new passion was named Deborah. Apparently, he was afraid that his wife would want to find Carol and take revenge on the family wrecker. One way or another, the couple began to live together, and their relationship became truly close. Davide helped Carol with the filming of explicit photos and videos, receiving a portion of her earnings in return. Carol turned into a celebrity in this industry and began to receive contracts from other countries. Her boyfriend knew that she was filming adult movies where she had sex with other men and participated in public performances. However, he seemed not to be bothered by this. But in reality, David was quite a jealous man, although this did not extend to Carol's work. Sometime after the beginning of their relationship, Carol's ex-boyfriend approached her and suggested renewing their connection. When Fontana found out about this, he became enraged. He was afraid that the young beauty would leave him for a guy her age, so he decided to take action. The man repeatedly called his rival and threatened him, even though Carol herself had refused her ex. David's jealousy reached its peak when he began to threaten Carol's ex-boyfriend, who tried to rekindle their relationship. Unknown individuals punctured the tires on the rival's car twice, and although Fontana's involvement could not be proven, his threats made him the prime suspect. Meanwhile, Carol's popularity on social media was growing rapidly. She already had over 30,000 followers on her pages. Carol traveled a lot, filming content in the Czech Republic and the Netherlands. In addition, she fulfilled individual orders received in private messages. For a considerable amount of money, Carol brought to life in front of the camera scenarios sent by clients. In the fall of 2021, a new man appeared in the heroine's life, a colleague from adult films, Salvatore Galda. Real feelings flared up between them, and soon Salvatore gave Carol an engagement ring and later proposed to her. Carol agreed to marry him, but now the question arose of how to get rid of Davide. Life with the banker had become unbearable for Carol. She no longer loved him, dreaming of another man with whom she was secretly meeting. At the same time, Fontana continued to take part in her activities, taking a percentage from each video he helped with. The business was thriving, bringing the girl considerable wealth. She had earned enough to afford not to work. In Carol's immediate plans was a return to Verona to be closer to her son. She continued to perform live at private parties and special events related to the adult industry. But at the beginning of 2022, the woman suddenly disappeared from the radar, ceasing all activity. Only occasionally did she respond in writing to messages from friends and family. Posts on social media also became infrequent. It seemed that the once active Carol had lost interest in her projects. Loved ones began to worry as this situation lasted for about 2 months. Carol did not talk to anyone on the phone and did not answer calls. To all questions, she replied that she was busy with household chores, looking for housing in Verona, and establishing a relationship with her child. Later, Carol reported that she was going on vacation to Dubai. Carol's worried friends contacted David, but he admitted that their relationship had ended and he had no idea where to look for the missing woman. This whole situation looked extremely suspicious, and soon it became clear why. On March 20th, 2022, a man who was walking along the picturesque cliffs in the village of Borno noticed strange large black garbage bags from the height of the ledge on the shore. They seemed half empty but heavy, as if filled with stones. Intrigued, the local resident descended to the mysterious objects, which felt unusual to the touch. Upon untying the first bag he came across, the man found a human hand inside and immediately called the police. The carabinieri, who arrived at the top of the slope, immediately noticed that the bags had been thrown from the cliff. Because of this, they had been torn on the rocks, which could have damaged the contents. A total of 4 bags were found with 18 parts of a mutilated body. From the very beginning, it became obvious that the remains had been deliberately disfigured to make identification difficult. The victim's face was so distorted that it was impossible to recognize her without additional laboratory analysis. The flesh had been cut from some body parts as if on purpose. As for the condition of the remains, the killer was apparently a hunter or a butcher. He skillfully dismembered the body, acting professionally and precisely, knowing where and how to cut. Before throwing the bags down the slope, the parts had been stored in the cold for a long time. Forensic experts suggested that they had simply been dumped from a freezer right off the ledge shortly before a passerby stumbled upon the terrible find. Given the thorough approach and professionalism of the criminal, the police suspected that they were dealing with a serial killer. One of the investigators recalled a similar case in March 2005 when as many as 10 bags with the remains of 2 people were found nearby. The killer was caught then and put behind bars, but the handwriting was too similar, which led to the chilling thought that a maniac was on the loose. To get closer to solving the crime, it was necessary to establish the identity of the victim and find evidence. But the body was so mutilated that it was impossible to even determine the gender without additional analysis. A thorough examination in the laboratory was due. Meanwhile, a press conference was held, necessary to warn local residents. At that time, the Carabinieri still did not know who the victim was. The gender had not yet been determined, but people were warned, and important witnesses who might have noticed something were sought. The cause of death also remained unknown. During this period, forensic experts worked actively to provide answers to all these questions and delve into the gruesome details of the last minutes of the unidentified victim's life. Soon, they found out that they were dealing with a young woman about 155 centimeters tall with dark hair. Her nails were covered with purple nail polish, and several tattoos were found on her skin, 11 in total. But most of them turned out to be deliberately damaged by the killer. It seemed that attempts had been made to erase them, cut them off, or tear them off along with the skin. Apparently, the criminal wanted to hide all traces that would help identify the victim, thereby complicating the investigation. The tattoos became an important clue for the investigators. Despite the fact that the authorities did not yet know the name of the deceased, the public was already informed that the victim was a woman. The police released a description of some of the surviving tattoos in the hope that someone would recognize their owner. But people remained silent. A forensic examination established that the death had occurred more than a month ago, and before the body was thrown from the cliff, it had been stored in a freezer for a long time. This information caught the attention of journalist Andrea Torelli, who was also the editor of a magazine. The man became fascinated with the mysterious murder and began to analyze all the available information. Based on the data collected, Andrea made a logical assumption. Firstly, the criminal was unlikely to want to transport the remains to such a remote provincial area. Most likely, he lived relatively close to where the body was found. Secondly, the journalist was convinced that the killer was familiar with his victim, which meant that she herself must have lived nearby. Of course, these were only guesses, but it was from them that Torelli began his investigation. A pertinent question arose in the reporter's mind. Why had there been no reports of a missing person who fit the description of the girl found? After all, more than a month had passed since her death. How did it happen that her relatives did not notice her absence and did not search for her? A breakthrough in the investigation occurred a week after the body was discovered, on March 26, 2022. A random witness contacted the police, claiming that he recognized the dead girl from Borno. He managed to identify her precisely thanks to the tattoos he had previously seen when Carol gave an interview under the pseudonym Charlotte. It turned out that the victim was an actress in adult films and actively maintained pages on social media. After comparing Charlotte's photos with her tattoos, the Carabinieri were convinced that it was indeed her. To obtain useful clues, the police released the deceased's pseudonym. Andrea Torelli continued his own investigation, delving into the details of the murdered woman's life. He found out that Carol had collaborated with 2 agencies at once. At the first film studio, they replied that she had not worked with them for a long time, did not answer calls or messages, so the management decided that she had simply left the business, as sometimes happens. They could not tell anything more interesting. At the second film studio, the journalist spoke with another actress from adult films who called herself a friend of the deceased. She provided the phone number used by Charlotte. Thanks to this data, it was finally possible to find out the victim's real name, Carol Maltesi. Andrea Torelli tried to call the girl's cell phone number several times, but to no avail. Then he tried to contact her through a messenger. And, surprisingly, someone allegedly answered the text message, claiming to be Carol herself. The journalist, under the pretext of an interview about the life of an actress in this industry, tried to arrange a meeting with her. However, he received a rude refusal in response. Andrea understood that it was not actually Carol responding, but the likely killer. The reporter was persistent and tried to continue the dialogue, persuading the so-called Carol to record a voice message or talk on the phone. Having received another refusal, Torelli changed his tactics. He reported that the body of a girl with identical tattoos, like in Carol Maltesi's photos, had recently been found. Therefore, he would like to talk and make sure that the actress was alive. the criminal probably did not know about the discovery of the body, and this news came as a real shock to him. Apparently, he was counting on the remains not being found for a long time and then not being able to be identified. Fortunately, he was mistaken. The journalist continued the conversation, insisting on at least a 3-second conversation. But after that, the interlocutor simply disappeared. He stopped responding and reading messages. The reporter was convinced that he had just communicated with Carol's killer. He had 2 options for action. First, he could publish this information in his magazine. The news would become a sensation and make him famous. Second, he could turn to the police so that detectives could verify the information themselves. But then he risked the possibility of a leak of information that other media would publish. Moreover, the journalist understood that his intervention could end badly. After all, now the killer was aware that he was being sought, and therefore could try to flee to another country, hide somewhere in Italy, or resort to radical measures, take his own life. Despite all the risks and potential harm he could cause to the investigation, Andrea could also move it forward. And he did the right thing by first contacting the police. On the 27th, Torelli went to the police station and handed over the collected information to the Carabinieri. And only after that did he write an article in his magazine. But he did not provide all the details, indicate the victim's real name, or mention his communication with the killer. However, even such an article had the effect of a bomb exploding. After talking with Andrea, the criminal was already on guard. He began to monitor the news, so he quickly realized that the investigation was progressing and approaching him. Gripped by panic, he decided to report the girl's disappearance to the police, apparently to deflect suspicion from himself. On the day the article was published, Davide Fontana and Carol's fiancé named Salvatore came to the police station together. They filed a missing person report for the girl. They were immediately invited into an office for questioning, which lasted until 4 o'clock the next morning. On March 28th, official publications from other media appeared in newspapers stating that DNA examination had confirmed the identity of the deceased. It was Carol Maltesi. And the very next day, March 29th at 7:15 a.m., the Carabinieri again appealed to the public through the mass media. They reported that a 43-year-old man had been detained on suspicion of premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances. It turned out to be Davide Fontana, who had been nervous and confused in his testimony from the very beginning of the interrogation. At first, he claimed that he had not seen the girl for 2 years, but this, of course, was not true. In addition, it did not explain why the man decided to report the disappearance just a few days after her body was found. The investigators quickly managed to break the main suspect. Under pressure, Davide began to talk. According to him, on January 11th, he and Carol were filming a video commissioned by one of the fans of her work. The man admitted that it was a much more extreme recording than the ones the couple had made before. The customer asked to put a bag over Carol's head, tie her up, tape her mouth shut, and also beat her and hit her on the head with a hammer several times in the process. According to the script, Davide was supposed to torture the actress, and she voluntarily agreed to this. So the man started the actions on record. He dealt several blows to the head with a hammer and also beat the tied-up girl for a long time. When it was finally over and David removed the bag, it turned out that Carol was dying. She was still twitching in her death throes, so the killer, according to him, was worried that Carol was continuing to suffer. Allegedly wanting to relieve her from suffering, he took a kitchen knife and cut her throat out of mercy. From the suspect's confessions, it became known that instead of calling the police or an ambulance when Carol was dying, he first finished off his victim and then began to plan how to get rid of the body. For 3 months after the murder, he dismembered Carol's remains and stored them in a freezer. At the same time, the man used the murdered woman's cell phone, communicating with her relatives and friends through social networks and messengers. In this way, he maintained contact and created the illusion that Carol was alive. The criminal's testimony was confused and fragmentary. He often got confused and changed some details of the story. His entire story looked doubtful, and everything required careful verification. In the end, the detectives managed to recreate an approximate picture of what had happened. As it turned out, Carol really wanted to move to Verona to be closer to her son. Here, Carol planned to gradually end her career in the dubious industry. She no longer wished to take part in it and strove to become an ordinary person. Carol intended to marry her boyfriend Salvatore. On January 8, 2022, she performed at the club for the last time, and on the 11th, she was going to shoot a commissioned video with Davide for the last time. The investigation established that the order came from a fake account created by the banker himself. In it, he described in detail the perverse video that Carol was supposed to shoot. The scene included tying up, taping the mouth shut, a bag over the head, beating, and a blow to the head with a hammer. During the process, the man was supposed to find out the password to the girl's cell phone from her. This was part of a script conceived as the highest manifestation of domination over a person. Carol agreed, not even suspecting that by doing so, she was giving her executioner the opportunity to kill her. Initially, they agreed that he would imitate all actions, without using force, and Carol would pretend to be suffering in order to avoid real injuries. Instead, Davide acted at full force, getting carried away and crossing all boundaries. Obviously, all this was planned in advance, so the crime clearly had an intentional character. As soon as Davide found out the password to Carol's phone, he deviated from the script and began to brutally beat the girl until he beat her to death with a hammer. For several days, the killer came to the filming location and looked at the lifeless actress, satisfying his sadistic needs. After that, the man went to a hardware store, where he bought a hacksaw, large scissors, an electric saw, and spare blades. The banker also ordered a large freezer and a brazier, using Carol's phone to do so. It was the brazier that caused the severe burns that the police found on her body. On January 14th, Carol was supposed to go to Paris with her boyfriend Salvatore, but Davide told him that Carol had contracted COVID and was self-isolating. The fiancé believed it, because many people in their circle were sick. He unsuccessfully tried to contact Carol under various pretexts, but Davide refused each time, referring to her poor health. The story of Carol Maltesi's murder shook all of Italy. Davide Fontana, a banker and a celebrity in the culinary world, was arrested on March 29, 2022, on suspicion of premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances. It was he, as it turned out, who was the main person involved in this horrific case. Strangely, for 2 months, none of the girl's relatives or loved ones tried to get into Davide's dwelling to find out what had actually happened to Carol. This played into the hands of the killer, who calmly dismembered the body and hid traces of the crime, staging the illusion of his victim's life. According to him, Carol's phone did not stop ringing. Every day, someone from friends or relatives wrote a message or called. Occasionally, Davide even updated the girl's pages on social networks with pictures from her personal gallery. From her bank card, he made noticeable purchases and even paid for housing rent to maintain the legend that Carol was living a secluded life because she was being treated. After the interrogation was over, Fontana stated that he had tried to commit suicide by writing a statement about Carol's disappearance, but he could not do it because he was arrested. However, no one believed this, because for 3 months, while the man was enjoying the crime he had committed and hiding its traces, he had enough time for suicide. Court hearings in the Carol Maltesi case began on November 24, 2022. The lawyer insisted on the version of unintentional murder. They say Davide got carried away with fulfilling the client's order and accidentally killed his beloved girl. But prosecutors convincingly proved that it was he who created the fake request for this cruel video, which means that the massacre was planned in advance. The password to the victim's phone also became known to the criminal not by chance. He wanted to buy time by responding on behalf of Carol and deceiving her loved ones in order to have time to get rid of the body. The prosecution believed that the motive for the crime could be jealousy or greed. Carol's relationship with Salvatore was developing rapidly. The couple was planning a wedding, and Carol was going to move out from Davide. For him, this meant the loss not only of a mistress, but also of the income he received from their joint filming. However, considering Carol's main occupation, regular sex with different men in front of the camera for money, the version about jealousy did not look too plausible. Davide never showed jealousy about the girl's work at several studios at the same time, but as soon as she decided to end her career and start a family with another man, he immediately killed her. A psychiatric examination showed that the accused was sane and fully aware of his actions. The verdict in this high-profile case was announced on June 12, 2023. Although the prosecution demanded life imprisonment, the judge decided that the killer's actions were not intentional in nature. Even the fact that the body was dismembered was not taken into account as an aggravating circumstance. As a result, Davide Fontana received a surprisingly lenient sentence, only 30 years in prison. In addition, he was obliged to pay compensation to the victim's 7-year-old son in the amount of 180,000 euros. He had to pay Carol's parents a total of another 100,000, and the father of her child 20,000 euros in compensation. Such a court decision shocked the Maltese family. Davide's involvement in similar murders in the past could not be proven. Journalist Andrea Torelli, who took an active part in this case, wrote a book about the course of the investigation. In it, he told in detail how his intervention helped expose one of the cruelest murderers in the history of Italy. Dear friends, here we have come to the end of this sad and instructive story. The tragic fate of Carol Maltese makes us think about many things: difficult life choices, the price of quick earnings, the importance of valuing one's own life and safety. Every person has the right to choose their own path, and we cannot condemn Carol for her decision to become an actress in adult films. But at the same time, we must understand that any profession has its risks. Just as a policeman is exposed to the danger of being killed by a criminal every day, work in the adult entertainment industry, unfortunately, can also be extremely dangerous. Carol's story is a bitter lesson for all of us. It teaches us that we should not make important life decisions hastily, guided only by the desire to make money quickly. Sometimes what seems like easy money can turn into a terrible tragedy. Before taking a serious step, it is worth stopping and thinking not twice but 3 times, to weigh all the pros and cons, to assess the possible risks and consequences. Of course, each of us dreams of financial stability and prosperity, but are money worth risking one's health, safety, and sometimes even life for? Isn't it better to earn less, but be able to enjoy every day lived, to feel protected and needed by one's loved ones? Let us be wiser and more prudent. Let us not allow greed and the desire for easy gain to cloud our minds. Let us not be afraid of hard and honest work. Let our path to success be longer but safer. Let us value every moment spent with family and loved ones, because no money can bring back a lost life. Justice in this world can sometimes be cruel and relentless. Davide Fontana, Carol's killer, received only 30 years in prison, too lenient a punishment for such a terrible crime. But can any term behind bars return a mother to a little son or a daughter to her parents? If only it were possible to turn back time and convince Carol not to take that fatal step. But what happened, happened. Now we can only learn important lessons from this tragedy and live on, not repeating others' mistakes. Let Carol's death be a reminder to each of us. Life is priceless and fragile, so cherish it and do not subject it to unjustified risk. In conclusion, I want to address all of you, dear viewers. Thank you for being here throughout this difficult story. I know that sometimes it was painful and scary for you, but you found the strength to listen to Carol's story to the end. I hope it did not leave you indifferent and prompted you to take a fresh look at some things. And most importantly, take care of yourselves, my dear friends. Value each new day spent in the circle of family and loved ones. Do not risk your lives for the sake of illusory promises of quick enrichment. Remember that there are things incomparably more important than money: your health, your dreams, your feelings. You are the most precious thing in this world. Each of you is a unique and wonderful person, worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Believe in yourselves, listen to your heart, and never let others decide for you. Your life is your priceless gift, so dispose of it wisely. Know that somewhere out there on the other side of the screen there is a person who sincerely and infinitely believes in you. A person who wants you to be happy and always make the right decisions. That person is me. And I love you, my friends. I love each and every one of you who is listening to me now. I know that my content is not perfect, and I can make better videos, but I am trying very hard. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. It's the best thanks for me. Take care of yourselves and see you next time. Remember, you are unique and priceless. Life is beautiful. The main thing is to learn how to manage it properly. With love and respect, your Detective John Brooks.